right, tell me your first and last name and spell it, please.
Yeah, my name is Cortland Cox. My first is spelled Courtland. Last name spelled Cox, C-O-X.
And you're gonna look at her for the entire time.
Okay, all right.
All right, tell me well, you didn't work in Atlanta.
I did not work in
Okay,
it.
so we won't
I did work in Atlanta, yes, I did,
Okay,
but not during the Atlanta student movement, no, no.
gotcha, okay. So
No, I
let's
worked
start
in
that
Atlanta,
question.
yes.
Okay. All right, so tell me what year you worked in Atlanta and what you did while you were there.
I worked in Atlanta as the program I guess, what they call it, program secretary for the organization. I was the person who Foreman asked to help direct a number of the field staff. So we had a structure in SNCC there. Jim was the executive secretary. We had a chairman, John Lewis, and then I was called the program director. And my responsibility was to deal with the programs that existed in the organization. And I guess ostensibly was the number 3 person in the organization. I also, when John Lewis, the chairman, and Jim Foreman traveled overseas to Africa to go to, at the invitation of President Sekou Touré from Guinea, and was organized by Harry Belafonte, I had responsibility for the organization while they were overseas, dealing with programs and also administration. So at one point, I had responsibility for the programs, for the fundraising, for the personnel issues, all those issues. So that's kind of when I was in Atlanta, I had those responsibilities.
And then where was the office based out of in Atlanta?
8.5 Raymond Street.
All right. Oh, we'll say the SNCC office was.
Or the SNCC office was at 8.5 Raymond Street, or right off Hunter Street, which was, convenient because you could go to Pascal's or any of the other wonderful places on Hunter Street.
All right, and then how old were you at the time?
I was, let's see, I would say 23 years old.
All right, and then how was SNCC different from, let's say, CORE and an SCLC?
Well, I think they were probably, as you look at the civil rights movement during that period, you probably had a number of gradations. If you let's start with the NAACP. They had made their name on legal action, meaning Brown versus Board of Education, and that was very important. Then you had the Urban League, who was engaged in a number of things. SCLC, CORE, and SNCC were activist organizations. SCLC really were older folks in the ministry and was really engaged in a lot more in mobilization and really centered around Dr. King. So he was the organization. He was the movement. He was the spokesperson, but he was also the organization. Everything was centered around him, but also it was much more in terms of mobilization. CORE was a hybrid. CORE was mobilization in a lot of places in the North, but in the South, where SNCC was, a lot of it we did with organizing. SNCC lived in the communities. We worked in the communities. We didn't go in, have a demonstration, and leave. We were there. We were there for months and years. So I think the big difference between the 3 activist organizations that you mentioned, CORE, SCLC, and SNCC, was their approach to how you dealt with people. One dealt with primarily mobilization. I would say that's SCLC and half CORE. And then one dealt with organizing in the community. That was SNCC and the southern branch of CORE.
All right, then also at the time, the Atlantic Choir, the paper founded by the ASM and edited by Julian Vaughn. How important was it as an intra-informational tool?
Very important. I mean, one.
Include a little bit of my question in your answer, I'm sorry.
Okay, the paper that Julian edited was very important because, you know, SNCC, I mean, now I'm beginning to realize how sophisticated SNCC was. I mean, I really don't think that we just thought it was part of the work, the things that we had to do. But the ability to have the student voice, the ability to have, you know, a way of communicating with the world, the way of putting out information. The thing that surprised me, the student voice is, you know, the compilation of the student voice. At this point, you're talking was being sold at Stanford by somebody for $2,000. It is a record of what went on, and interestingly enough, a lot of the documentation that was developed by Julian and others like that, our research department, a number of people are getting their PhDs on it. So we were responsible for a lot of PhDs given, you know, the work that was being done.
All right, then, no, you didn't have anything to do with the Hurt Plaza March, right?
The,
March on Hurt Plaza?
no.
Okay. All right, then, okay, so more than 4 decades have passed since your participation in SNCC. How did it change?
I think that SNCC, I mean, I think that SNCC gave me the perspective of how I viewed the world and how gave me tools to analyze what was going on. I mean, I think we learned I was in SNCC from 1960 basically to 1967. And I probably learned more in that time about real power, about how things are really organized around economics, how things are viewed culturally. How do you now mobilize, how do you now organize people to take responsibility for their own lives? How do you now begin to see yourself as an actor and not a reactor? How do you now see yourself as articulating things that, you know, are amiss in this country and beginning to help people understand that, you know, what we see as problems, people on the other side see as solutions. So I think the most important thing was that SNCC gave me a worldview and a way of analyzing what, you know, life is about in this country.
I think we covered everything. Oh, wait, I have one more question.